anything like me, this time of year, you're in the thick of harvesting. And if you're not, then probably some other local farmers are. So I wanted to go over some things to do, because gardening from start to finish is about planning and preparing. And if you don't have a plan in place, sometimes all the hard work that you've done in your garden can go to waste. You either don't have the time, you don't know what to do with it, and it all becomes really overwhelming. So I just want to show you some things that I do. Some are very basic, so if you're a beginner, this might be helpful. And if you have any suggestions on what you do, I would love to hear them. I'm always looking for new ways to do things and new combinations. First, tomatoes. So I've already canned some tomatoes this year. I grow determinate Roma tomatoes, and they produce about in the same time period, but not all at once. So it's good and bad depending on your schedule. So this is the second harvest. I'll probably go out another at least once, if not 2 more times. So with tomatoes, the good thing is if you don't have the time when they're ripe, which is when you want to can them, you don't want them to be overripe or not ripe enough, which can be hard to coordinate. So you can go ahead and core these. You can cut them in half just to make sure no bugs got in them, or they're not already rotting on the inside, and go ahead and throw them in your freezer. And then when you're ready, they'll be waiting for you. And actually, when you freeze tomatoes, the skins usually come off. So you can skip the blanching process typically when you freeze tomatoes. So that's a good way to do that. I can them. So things I do is I use, I can do whole canned tomatoes. And I did most of these with my mom last year. And what I found is, because I don't actually like fresh tomatoes and I don't like whole tomatoes even canned, I found myself in a lot of recipes just pureeing it anyhow. So that's more equipment that I have to get out. And when you're canning, it is a mess. So I figured, well, I already have the kitchen a big mess, I might as well just process it the way I want to use it. So it's super simple in the winter to prepare dinner, or at least a little bit easier. So I've done some just plain pureed tomatoes, as well as went ahead and cooked down some tomato sauce with just basil, which I usually always add to anything I'm using. Depending on your lifestyle and how you do things, it can be pretty versatile with tomatoes. And there's so many options with tomatoes depending on how much time you have to can it in the first place. When you are canning, I use hot water bath canning method. You have to have acidic foods or be adding acid to it to can it. So that really comes down to safety. So tomatoes are one of them. So it's super simple to do as far as canning goes. Hot water bath canning, typically you're gonna have most of the tools to do it. If you're just starting out, of course there's gonna be some tools you need. I'm not gonna go into that in this video. Compared to pressure canning, that can get pretty pricey. I would like to do it eventually, but right now I get by with just hot water bath canning and the other methods of storing that I'm going to share with you. Another thing I do, which also takes a lot of time, so if you have time and you have a lot of harvest of tomatoes that you need something to do with, ketchup. So my mom and I also did ketchup last year, and so it's really time consuming. I will give you a warning, but it is so good, and you get to control what's in it, which is what I love about gardening, love about putting away food, is I know what's in it, whether I grew it or I got it from someone local, which we'll get into. Tomatillos. So I did a couple of different things this year. Tomatillos, I tried a roasted one. I also did just a regular salsa verde. And then I grow ground cherries. Some people call them gooseberries. They have an acidic profile. So I mix those with the tomatillos and some hot cherry peppers, just a little bit. And I can that into a salsa. So we'll get to try that as it mellows out in 3 to 4 weeks after being canned. I did a peach salsa. So this is a perfect example of using your local resources to can. So even if you don't garden or you don't grow everything, because who does, local farmers, local growers are great. So I got these peaches and I went ahead and canned them. Again, it's a local source. I know where it comes from. It hasn't traveled. I know how fresh it is. So I went ahead and did that with some of my fresh peppers that I have in the garden, and just kind of mixed them up. So that's a really nice treat, especially in the winter. Just peaches scream summer, and I just love having summer foods available in the winter time, especially when things get real drear. Apples. So apples are about here. This is from last year. So again, I get apples from, I believe we got these from Keeney's in Tipton. So we did applesauce. Again, another thing I love about applesauce. Applesauce store-bought can be very sugary. You don't know the source of it. So making applesauce homemade, you really get to control the sugar content. Apples are already very high in sugar. So you really don't need to add much sugar. It's all about your preference. So this is just me. So applesauce, and we also did cinnamon applesauce. So that is canning. So more preservation techniques that I wanted to touch on are fermented, fresh, and frozen. So ferments are really great because they're healthier than something you would can. When you have to can something in the hot water, it is going to destroy a lot of nutrients. Fermenting not only makes those nutrients more available, but also adds the benefit of probiotics into your diet. So some things that we ferment is pickles. I have gallons and gallons of pickles because of how prolific cucumbers are. So fermenting is a great way to do that. Also, two different type of peppers. So the pepperoncinis are fermented, as well as the banana peppers. These are actually suggested by the kids that we grow these to do just this. So it's great when your kids find something that they actually like to eat that's healthy. Heck yeah, we're gonna do it. So we did that, and then also beets. Beets are another one that is super easy to pickle or ferment. So a great resource I like is Cultures for Health. They give a lot of different recipes that I use, as well as different things that you can buy for fermenting, anywhere from vegetables to dairy products. So fresh things that you can pull out of the garden and that take very minimal prep work to keep it to store throughout the winter. So one of those is garlic. So these are garlic that we harvested, and then onions I just pulled out of the ground. These just have to cure. They have to go in a place where you can just hang it essentially, and let it cure, and then you can use it throughout the winter. Keep in mind the different varieties for all of these things. Some varieties are better at preserving or pickling than others, such as the cucumbers. You're going to want to pick a specific variety that's meant for that, as well as onions. So depending on the variety of onion is going to depend on how long it stores. Also, of course, your conditions that you have it stored in. This is a hard nut garlic, and actually they grow very well here, but they don't store as long as a soft nut garlic. So just keep in mind when growing things, grow something that's going to work for you and what you want it for. So if you're wanting to grow things to store, make sure you're picking a variety that is meant for that purpose. That whether that's potatoes, onions, whatever you're growing, make sure it's a variety that's going to work for you. Carrots. Carrots, again, depending on the variety, can store a long time. They're going to have different flavor profiles, so keep that in mind. And the flavor changes throughout the time it's stored. So it's a fun thing to play with. Find out what you like, find out what really didn't work or really didn't store that well in your conditions, and make sure you're giving it conditions to set you up for success. Things like beets. You don't have to necessarily pickle them. You can store those in your cellar or whatever you have to store vegetables. Cabbage is another one. Potatoes, of course. Pumpkins, squash, again, check the variety. Your like Long Island cheese pumpkin or Hubbard squash is going to store for a long time. Your delicata squash, you're going to probably want to get done with that definitely before Christmas and probably by Thanksgiving. For freezing, there are so many things you can freeze, and so I don't want to touch on this too much because you're probably well aware that you can freeze things. If one of your main ways of storing things is going to be freezing, make sure you get the equipment to allow you to do that, whether it's freezer bags or I use a food saver to do this. That's going to actually allow you to freeze things. Yes, you can freeze things, but long term, make sure you have what you need so that it doesn't degrade or spoil in the freezer. And then make sure you label it so you know what it is. And this goes for anything. Label it. You think you're going to remember, at least I don't. And then, so berries. Berries are super simple to freeze. And when we talk about using local produce, I have some blueberry bushes that I just planted. My soil's not acidic enough yet, as I'm amending it, to have a harvest for what I need it for. So I went to Kapnick's and got some blueberries, and we did a U-pick. I know where it came from. It only traveled long enough to get from Kapnick's to my house, and then I froze it. Super simple, a good way to support local businesses as well as your health. When we're talking about foraging, another one that's super easy to forage, and probably you know somebody who has a mulberry tree, and if you do, they probably don't mind that you pick from it because they make a mess if it's somewhere like in a driveway or near a house. Mulberries are another great one to store. I've also made preserves with it. So that's another great one that you can save throughout the winter. Also, when you're freezing, there are certain ones that need to be blanched, which means it's going to need to be put in hot, like boiling water for a couple minutes. Go ahead and just Google it because it may change depending on what you're trying to preserve. Other things you need to blanch are things like broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus in the spring is going to need to blanch before you freeze it. Carrots, if you want to do that, blanch it and then freeze it. So that is what I have for preserving your harvest. I hope some of these tips were helpful. If you have anything for me that you don't see that I have that you think she needs this in her life, please let me know. Drop it in the comments below. I look forward to hearing from you, and let me know how you're preserving your harvest this year. This has been Maria from Living Atlanta Way Realty. Have a great day. Bye-bye.